And welcome in, Bombers Nation, to another edition of the True Blue Podcast, the return of this show here on GShow Productions, brought to you by Mid-Canada Fasteners and Tools, Terrico, and Goaltenders. I'm your host, Graham, the GShow Forsyth. Happy to be here with you on this Sunday, a day after the Bombers clinched their ticket into the 110th Grey Cup over the BC Lions. I'm going to be talking about that game in this episode today, as well as talking about the Bombers making history in their franchise history, making it to a fourth straight Grey Cup for the first time ever, and also going to be talking about Brady Oliveira, his impact this season. Should he be the MOP frontrunner? Does voting even happen at this point of the season? We'll discuss that coming up later on. I'm going to talk about the rest of the Bombers award nominations, because not just Oliveira is nominated for the Bombers, but also guys like Hardrick, as well as Mike O'Shea being nominated for awards this year. Going to be talking about the Bombers All-Stars and a look ahead into that upcoming game against the Montreal Alouettes next week in the biggest game of the season, the 110th Grey Cup. That's all coming up next on this edition of the True Blue Podcast on GShow Productions. Like I said, brought to you by Mid-Canada Fasteners and Tools, Terrico, and Goaltenders. Myself, Graham, the GShow Forsyth. I'll be back to recap last night's 24-13 win for the Bombers over the Lions to punch their ticket to the championship game here on True Blue in just a moment. All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's get into it, shall we? We'll just pop the sponsor up here, and there we go. Well, the West Final yesterday, not gonna lie, I was a bit nervous coming into this one. The way BC's offense looked the week before in the West Semi against the Calgary Stampeders, obviously not on the same level as the Bombers, the Stampeders, where Vernon Adams Jr. was still playing lights-out football, and that offense proving why they were such a high-powered scoring, high-powered passing offense throughout the season. But taking a look at yesterday's game, it was the Bombers beating the Lions 24-13, and the Bombers holding Vernon Adams Jr. to only 50% completion percentage. He threw for only 221 yards, only 1 TD, and 3 interceptions. They had some success on the ground, but most of their production came through the air in this game. As for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, looking at their offense, it was really all about Brady Oliveira in this one. 21 carries for him, 109 yards. Kenny Lawler having a really good game in terms of big catches and some big moments. Zach Calero, nothing fancy in this one whatsoever, but efficient, hitting the short gains nicely a lot in this game. 14 for 21, 158 TD yards, passing yards, that is, 0 TD, 0 interceptions, and there were some passes where it seemed like Zach Caleros maybe could have connected on some deep shots, but BC's defense was covering pretty well throughout this game, I do gotta say. But yeah, Brady Oliveira, it started with him in this game, like I said, and this Bombers team won this game with physical play, old school football. Starting on that first drive, all of the touches basically went to Oliveira. There was one incompletion in there, I believe intended for Rasheed Bailey, but 70 yards all from Oliveira on that first drive. He had some catches in there too, but this set the tone for Winnipeg. Their blockers getting in the push, and it was excellent to see that motivation, them being fired up. And they came out with this game plan to say, hey, I'm going to continue, or we're going to continue to run the ball, and you won't be able to stop us. And that was highlighted on that first drive. Now, the game plan for Winnipeg in that West Final was to hit the short yardage gain. Deep shots were defended well, like I said, and the Bombers controlled time of possession by a lot because of this. 37 minutes and 44 seconds to 22 minutes and 16 seconds in total time of possession. But as the game went along, BC, their defense shored up and started stopping Oliveira for shorter gains. It really proved down the line that Winnipeg was having some problems converting on scoring. Castillo had 2 missed field goals in there, but when you have the best defense in the West and special teams played as well as they did in terms of Halleck getting that big block to score and make it 15-3. The 2 missed field goals from Castillo, yeah, but he made them when it mattered the most, and this team was doing a good job covering when they were making mistakes. But it was the defense that really did come through and step up for this Bombers team in this game. In that West Final, 10 sacks. Coverage was causing a lot of problems for Vernon Adams Jr. all game long, made him hesitate. They took away his first, second, and even third read very well in this game, and we're doing a really good job of getting 4 guys, even 5 guys through at times to contain Vernon Adams Jr., not give him really anywhere to go and escape. And this Bombers team was doing it kind of by committee. Big Hill goes down, and then Clements comes in, fits in well, steps up for a sack for himself. Jefferson looked like a man on a mission, a man possessed out there last night, and for this Bombers defense, only 3 points allowed in that second half. You could say that this game, it could have been even more in the Bombers' favor if it wasn't for that Hail Mary at the end of that second half, or of that first half at the end of the second quarter, that BC converted on. So, yeah, the defense just posed their will. They dominated in this game, and posed their will, as I should say. Sucks losing Big Hill, but Clements looked like he filled in big time. It's going to be interesting to see if Big Hill makes an appearance in this game coming up in the Grey Cup. He was seen leaving IG Field with crutches, apparently, that's the word. But yeah, I got some confidence, and Clements obviously doesn't have the same veteran experience and the same amount of reps as Big Hill does in first team, but looks like he has some talent, and I think that he should be at least adequate for the Bombers next week. But gotta give it to Zach Collaros as well. Played smart with the football, took his shots, couldn't cash in, but when the play wasn't there, Zach Collaros wasn't forcing it like he usually does. He was either, sliding down or getting rid of it, looking short in this game. And on his deep shots, it looked like they were calculated. Looked like he went to throw it up for his receiver to make a play on the football, and that ended up being the case. It's just they couldn't quite convert on it. Lawler, like I said, made some great catches in this game, and yeah, the defense, the huge reason why Winnipeg advances, limiting the number 1 passing offense in the league to quite a few yards than they're used to usually getting. Sacks were in all game for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, 10 sacks for them. BC's O-line didn't really have any answers for that Bombers pass rush as the game went along. And yeah, the Bombers off to a 4th straight Grey Cup, looking for their 3rd in 4 seasons at that. Speaking of that, the Bombers join history. Now, I've been trying to research it. Didn't feel like going through Wikipedia and that type of stuff to find the info, to be honest with you. But I know that TSN, it said yesterday that it had been like 4+ decades or something since the 50s or the 60s since there's been a team that's made it 4 straight. Well, anyways, it's a first in Bombers history as this Bombers team punched their ticket to a 4th straight Grey Cup last night at IG Field, as you already know. It's their 4th straight Grey Cup appearance, which is the most consecutive by this franchise in its history. And it's just amazing to see, because when I started watching Blue Bombers football, this was a team that I think had a Grey Cup appearance a few years before. The Bombers made a Grey Cup appearance in 2011, and that's really the best they were until the Nichols era, when Nichols came in and things started to really turn around for this Bombers team before 2019, when they made some huge moves like bringing in Zach Collaros to really get this team over the top when Nichols was out with an injury that year. But yeah, it's just amazing to see the success that the Bombers have had, win or lose next week in Montreal, in terms of getting to the Grey Cup, because growing up, watching this team, they suffered through some really bad quarterback play, got blown out in a lot of games. Can never forget when the Riders beat them 52-0 on Labor Day. That was a low point. I remember going to a game, and it was Anthony Calvillo, but they just ripped the Bombers. And it just seemed like, for a lot of my life at least, that the Bombers were getting blown out in a lot of games and a lot of seasons from what I watched growing up. And there was a problem, with the management. It seemed like there was no accountability throughout the roster and throughout the organization. And things really started to change when Mike O'Shea came here, when they went out and got new management like they have, and Wade Miller as well as Walters. And they've really made this team exciting and fun to watch again, and have made this town a football town again. In a lot of ways, which is the culture and fans going to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers game. Like, you go to a Winnipeg Blue Bombers game, there's nothing like it at this point in the city because of the energy and the passion that is there. It's so nice to see this after, especially with guys like O'Shea and Hall. There was questions if these guys should keep their jobs moving forward, but they stuck with their process. They accumulated enough talent. I think getting Zach Collaros was the finishing piece that was missing from this Bombers team, and since he's been here, this team has made 4 straight Grey Cups. The culture that's been built here, and players wanting to stay and come here, is huge. The fans being loud, and once the Bombers started winning, it seemed like it just became an addiction for the big-time players to re-sign and for more fans to start going to more games. It's been like 5-6 consecutive sellouts for this Bombers team 4 years in to when this team last won a Grey Cup. I guess a bit more than that now, since it was in 2019. But, players deciding to re-sign with the core, getting them to stay, those players still making an impact, it has been so impressive to see. And just seeing, the old core still stepping up with new blood entering into the mix is amazing, with guys like Dalton Schoen just coming to the team last year. Brady Oliveira breaking out and having a pretty much historic season this year, if not pretty darn close to that. And looking at a guy like Evan Holm, who's just been so great for this Bombers team on defense. And there's a lot more that, I'm not mentioning. But, making winning decisions at deadline throughout the years has been huge. The season after they won their first one, they were struggling at kicking, so they go in and bring in Castillo. He's back on the team, of course, this year. They brought back in Lawler this season to add more receiving help. And, of course, bringing in Collaros, like I said, really seemed to put the finishing touches on the time to what the Bombers ended up starting off, which is a potential dynasty. If they win 3 Grey Cups in 4 years, I think that there's no way you can't say that this isn't a dynasty for this Bombers team. And just to see the progression for this franchise, to see the talent that they brought and the patience that they've had, to see it pay off to what it's at now, the Bombers playing for a 4th straight Grey Cup, making history, is amazing to see. And you can see that they're still hungry. It doesn't seem like guys like Jefferson, like Jeff Coate, really all the old core have really lost a step, which is even more impressive to see, in my opinion, at that. But one of those guys that may be missing the Grey Cup due to an injury he had yesterday, going down on the field, collapsing, of course, was able to get off the field, had to have some help, of course, but it wasn't good signs for Winnipeg's most consistent and most reliable defensive player in Adam Bighill, leaving IG Field in crutches yesterday. It was a late game injury, and Adam Bighill missing time, that is huge if he's not in for the Grey Cup for this Winnipeg Blue Bombers team. I don't believe I have the results in here in the broadcast window that I have right now. One sec. Just to get you guys up to date. So currently right now, he's not listed on the injury sheet. But I'm sure this is going to be updated. Leaving with crutches, he was really struggling to get off the field, needed some help, like I said. And I mean, it's big time losing a guy like that, losing a guy that has so much experience and is still playing at a consistently solid level, maybe not at his highest, but at a consistently good level. He means so much for this Bombers defense, Adam Bighill does, in terms of the play calls that he's made, the adjustments that he makes on the field, that is, and just him being the leader of this Bombers defense. Hoping that this Bombers team can rally around him. It's that next man up mentality at this point in the playoffs. We know Lawler can step up and be that number one receiver for this Bombers team while Dalton Schoen is out. Well, now Clements is going to have to prove that he can be that guy that can step in for Adam Bighill. And Clements looked like he was playing with good speed yesterday. He got some sacks on Burton Adams Jr., who, of course, the Bombers were making his life a living misery yesterday, it seemed. But, yeah, the big thing the Bombers do miss with Adam Bighill is just the command he brings out on the field, the experience he has, as well as that skill. I think Clements has the skill. Obviously, you don't have that same amount of experience, that same leadership, but that just means other guys are going to have to step up in that regard, right? And guys like Jefferson and Jeffcoat being the leaders on the field. And, I still think that this Bombers team without Bighill should be feeling good heading into the Grey Cup. I think Montreal isn't going to be a pushover like some people seem to be thinking, from what I've seen. We'll get into that maybe in just a bit. But yeah, definitely going to have to keep an eye on Adam Bighill. We're going to be doing this podcast again on Friday coming up this week, so we'll have a full update on him then, as we'll be 2 days away from the Grey Cup at that point. But looking at other guys that are notable on this injury list, really the most notable one is Dalton Schoen. Now, once again, I'm not sure how up to date this is, but it says these guys questionable or, out indefinitely on here, but questionable for the most recent date. For the upcoming date, which is going to be the newest, is November 19th. So Murphy and Schoen on the receiving end of things, both questionable. Murphy out with the hip, Schoen with that ankle. Hardrick as well as Schmeckel and McGee are also out. Hardrick, a old lineman for the Bombers, of course, he's out with a hip injury. He's also nominated for the most outstanding lineman this season, so hoping that he will be good to go for this upcoming game for the Bombers. A huge one against a Montreal team that they should not be taking lightly. But getting into the rest of it, McGee and Kelly, they're the only DBs with injuries. They are both questionable. All the guys up to this point that I've named, they're questionable. And Schmeckel, McGee, Kelly, Haba, and Garbett, all with undisclosed injuries, all being questionable. Fox, a D-tackle for the Bombers, undisclosed, questionable for the 19th. McCray, he's got a shoulder injury, he's questionable for the 19th. Miller, out indefinitely, as well as Darby and Beeksma, all out indefinitely for the Bombers. So the big names the Bombers are potentially missing heading into the 110th Grey Cup, I'd say, are Dalton Schoen, Hardrick, as well as Adam Bighill. Definitely some big shoes to fill for this Bombers team, but seems like they do have some decent depth on this year's squad. That receiving core is deep. With Kenny Lawler still being your number one in there, that's pretty darn good, and I think that's a problem a lot of teams in this league would probably like to have if there were to be injuries. Bighill, that's a big one, like mentioned, but Clements, I have some high hopes for him coming into that Grey Cup game, and yeah, Hardrick, I mean, it's tough to replace him being the top O-lineman nominated for that this year in the CFL. So Bombers O-line, which has been really, really dominant down the line, gonna have to step up potentially if Hardrick is out, but we'll wait till Friday to give you guys the full updates for that upcoming Grey Cup championship matchup of who's healthy, who's not going to be in the lineup potentially on Sunday on November the 19th. And awards should be given out soon this year for the CFL as the season wraps up in a week. on November 19th. Crazy how it's already come to an end, but I'm going to be getting into the All-Star selections and award nominations that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have gotten coming up next here on the True Blue Podcast for Episode 7, brought to you by Goaltenders, McKenna Fasteners and Tools, and Terrico. We'll be back in a moment, folks. Welcome back to the True Blue Podcast for Episode 7, brought to you by McKenna Fasteners and Tools, Terrico, and Goaltenders. Was going to be doing this yesterday. It's currently 2:22 on this November 12th date. Was going to be doing this yesterday, but I was throwing up since 6 a.m. It was not a fun day for Graham the GShow Forsyth yesterday. Not fun at all. I wouldn't wish that upon anyone, to be honest. I think I had like the 24-hour flu. Hoping that's the case, hoping it doesn't come back. But welcome back, everybody, to the program here. Talked about the Bombers advancing to their fourth straight Grey Cup, the injury to Adam Bighill, what implications that could have for the Bombers, as well as recapping the West Final from yesterday. We're going to get into some CFL awards here coming up. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the show up until this point. But yeah, we got a whole bunch of Blue Bombers nominated for some awards this year. Brady Oliveira nominated for the MOP, Chad Kelly the nominee from the East, Matthew Betts, Defensive Player nomination from the West, beating out any Winnipeg Blue Bomber. But yeah, Brady Oliveira has the nomination for Most Outstanding Canadian from the West, going up against Marc-Antoine Decoy from Montreal. Winnipeg also having Most Outstanding Offensive Lineman and Jamarcus Hardrick, going up against Dijon Allen of the Toronto Argonauts. Bombers not be nominated for any special teams players. The nomination went to Sean White, kicker for the BC Lions. And the last nomination the Bombers have is Mike O'Shea for Coach of the Year, going up against Ryan Dinwiddie. So, yeah, I'd written a blog article on Brady Oliveira getting the MOP nomination. I think it was so well-deserved. I've been so adamant about it in the last few shows here that Brady Oliveira has become the MOP nomination, and it hasn't even been close down the line in the West, even though they got the two best QBs statistically. Neither one of Vernon Adams Jr. and Zach Clare separated themselves. Now, people I've been saying that Chad Kelly shouldn't win this award this year because he didn't even put up the best stats out of any QB. I had made the argument in my blog that Kelly had stepped up in the biggest moments this season for the Argos and converted at a high level in those moments. I had spoken about how even though his QB stats weren't the highest, they were still really good, and he was the best dual threat QB in the league. He only lost one game, and I felt like, it's going to be close. The CFL is going to take in Toronto's historic season into account and how good Chad Kelly was, because he was really, really impressive this season. But then the argument could be, while he had the best team around him, you could make the same argument for Oliveira in terms of he had the best O-line around him and stuff like that. But yesterday was not good for Chad Kelly, as, we take a look at the stats that he had. 4 interceptions. He had a fumble in there as well. It just was not a great game for him. I'm not sure if MOP voting or if the voting for these awards is, in the regular season or not only, but if it were to continue into their performances in the West and the East final, I think that Oliveira would have the edge in this award because of how big time and how valuable he was to getting things going for that Bombers team yesterday. They established the run and then tried establishing the passing game, which they did, short passing game-wise, just couldn't hit on those big shots like I said. But yeah, I think that the MOP race, like I talked about in my article, is going to be close, and I think you could give it to any one of those players. I'd say heading into the playoffs, it probably favored Kelly by just a bit more, just because of the historical season that they had and how efficient he was this year, how he didn't turn over the ball as much compared to guys like Zach Collaros and Vernon Adams Jr., who were the best QBs in the league statistically, and how he was the best running QB in the league and most efficient at putting the ball in the end zone. It's just, yeah, all the things that could have gone wrong for Chad Kelly in yesterday's game did go wrong, and yeah, people are kind of thinking like Oliveira should be winning the MOP now, which, I mean, he was the best player at his position this season by far. Best player on the most high-scoring offense in the league as well. And one thing that's huge for him is that the award actually hasn't been as much of a QB award as I've been thinking in the past decade, as for skill players outside of QBs have won it. So yeah, it's a toss-up. I think between these guys, I think that they still might give it to Chad Kelly, but we will have to see, just because of his efficiency this year and how good Toronto was in the regular season. He was the man behind, a good chunk of their success offensively this season. But yeah, in terms of the rest of the award nominations from the Bombers, I mean, I think Brady Oliveira wins most outstanding Canadian. He's been the best skill player in the league in terms of skill position. As good as Marc-Antoine Decoy has been maybe this year for Montreal, I just don't see it. Brady Oliveira having the best rushing season since John Cornish. Have to give him at least most outstanding Canadian, because no Canadian did as great as him outside of maybe Nick Adamski, who couldn't get the nomination because he was in the West and on Oliveira's team. Jamarcus Hardrick going up against Dijon Allen. Well-deserved for Jamarcus Hardrick. He's been Mr. Reliable for this Bombers team for a very long time. Pretty sure he's nearing in on the record or nearing in on another win for this award, as he's had multiple for them now. He's the best O-lineman on this Bombers team. He's shown it this season, hoping he can be okay for the Grey Cup. But just throughout the years, the older that Hardrick gets, he ages like fine wine, and this season offered great pass protection for Zach Collaros, along with the rest of this O-line, was so dominant in the running blocking game. So yeah, Jamarcus Hardrick did a lot for this Bombers O-line this season, one of the best in the league. It's going to be interesting to see, because Dijon Allen was a part of maybe the best O-line in the league this season in the Toronto Argonauts, and by the stats, I believe that they were. So yeah, I think that's going to be another toss-up of an award, hoping that Hardrick gets it, but it'll be interesting to see for sure. Mike O'Shea going up against Ryan Dinwiddie for Coach of the Year. Best team in the East in the regular season with Ryan Dinwiddie's Toronto Argonauts, and best team in the West getting the nomination for their head coach in the Winnipeg Blue Bombers with Mike O'Shea. Listen, I think that for Mike O'Shea, he ends up winning this award last season over Dinwiddie. I think it shifts this season because, hey, I mean, as good as that team was for Toronto, I mean, a coach is going to get credit for that. A 16-2 season, tying a record for most wins, I believe, with 16 with the Edmonton Eskimos, now the Edmonton Elks. But yeah, for most of the season, I mean, yesterday seemed to be a bit of an anomaly and just Montreal playing absolutely fantastic. But Ryan Dinwiddie had his team ready to go for every single game this season. Pretty much from the start of the season until the end of the season. Of course, he sits key guys like Kelly and even sits Harris in that regular season matchup against the Bombers, and you could make an argument if their starters were in that game, they could have even been 17-1. But yeah, I think for Ryan Dinwiddie this season, he edges out O'Shea because even though the Bombers got the win over the Argonauts, just for more of this season, Dinwiddie was the coach of a team that only lost 2 games, a team that played some of the most, if not the most efficient football in the league, and a team that ranked near the top in every stat category. It was a team that seemed like they came ready to play every single game and executed in some huge moments, and Dinwiddie did a lot of good things to outcoach opposing coaches this year. So yeah, as much as I'd love to see this award go to O'Shea, going to go unbiased, no team was better in the regular season than the Toronto Argonauts. No team was really as complete as they were throughout the regular season, and a huge part of football is being prepared and ready to go. Dinwiddie doing an excellent job of that this season. Through 18 games for the Toronto Argonauts, but when it mattered the most yesterday, that was not the case, as Toronto ends up losing 38-17 as their season comes to an end. Just like that, I was going to snap, but I can't actually snap. Coming up next on GShow Productions, we are going to talk about the Montreal Alouettes and how impressive they were in that game yesterday, as well as talking about some All-Star nominations that the Bombers had, and giving some early previews, some early predictions perhaps for the 110th Grey Cup happening in Hamilton next week, or next weekend, 7 days away, a week from now in Tim Hortons Field. So coming up next, we're going to talk about more of it here on True Blue, episode 7. Stick around, folks. And welcome back to the True Blue Podcast, everybody, brought to you by Mid-Canton Fasteners and Tools, Terrico, and Goaltenders. For Mid-Canton Fasteners and Tools, visit their store locations in Brandon and Winnipeg today. Visit their website as well at midcantonfasteners.shop for more information on them. Your one-stop shop for all your industrial needs here in this province. Terrico serving Manitoba producers for over 80 years. Visit their website for more information at terrico.ca. And of course, Goaltenders, your goalie's personal video review service. Check it out at GordyTumilsonGoalies.ca for more information on this unique goaltending service, a one-on-one Zoom type of thing, going over footage, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, the Bombers already knew who they would be playing heading into the Grey Cup. Well, I guess the Bombers and BC Lions already knew who they would be playing, depending on which one would win, and the Bombers came out victorious 24-13 yesterday. But for the league leading best team in the league, the Toronto Argonauts, they were going up against the Montreal Alouettes, a team who they had beaten every single game during the season series. But Montreal reminding us all that the playoffs are a bit different, and if you don't come ready to play, and if you can't recover from the mistakes that happen, things could be going not so well for you. And that's exactly what happened in this game yesterday for this Montreal Alouettes team, taking advantage of Toronto just playing sloppy football. Montreal opened up this game up 7-0 off of a pick six on Chad Kelly, who had 4 interceptions on the game. It was 10-3 heading into halftime. Toronto seemed like they had a shot, but that third quarter ended up to be the real difference in this game. 14-0 for the Alouettes there. The Argonauts trying their best to come back. 14 points in that fourth quarter, but Montreal matched them with 14 of their own. Cody Fajardo, not fantastic in the win, but playing efficient football, only turned the ball over once, 18 for 25, was sacked 7 times, but that defense was really able to step up for this Alouettes team, which it's been a top 2 defense in many ways this season in the CFL. They really showcased it against East MOP nominee in Chad Kelly. 21 for 36, 246 TDs, 1 TD only, and the 4 interceptions. Kelly was also stripped in this game. The Argonauts turned over the ball 9 times in the loss. And hey, credit where credit is due, man, to this Montreal Alouettes team. I'm going to be honest, I thought Toronto would win this game. Going in, I thought we were going to be seeing a rematch, but I didn't take some things into account in terms of how Toronto really hasn't played meaningful football in like a month or even a bit more than that since clinching first place. This Montreal Alouettes team, this defense is for real, and I think that, people who pick Toronto like myself ended up forgetting about that. And, it's hard to beat a team 4 times in the CFL. And this Montreal team, even though they lost to the Argonauts, there were some games this season where they had chances and were even leading in games to beat them. This Montreal Alouettes team, offensively, their offense didn't win this game for them, but their offense did what it needed to do to extend drives and to keep things going a bit, keep the ball out of Toronto's hands for a bit longer, to give their defense a bit more rest to go out and do the things that they did. Taking a look at just, the stats aren't there, but taking a look at Toronto, or at the Montreal Alouettes, at their defensive stats, this team is pretty darn good, man. Just taking a look at where it may be. Here we go, the Week 21 stats. I won't be able to show you guys these on the screen. But, yeah, Montreal, they did the job defensively in that game against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. You look at them this season, they're second in points allowed, 4 less points given up than the Toronto Argonauts, who they faced yesterday. They're a team that was top 3 in giving up least yards per game in the CFL, a team that, wasn't that, as impressive against the run, but really impressive against the pass, and it showed against Chad Kelly yesterday. And look, they were getting pressure on Chad Kelly throughout this game, but a lot of these were just good coverage and Chad Kelly just making bad decisions and Montreal stepping up. Montreal getting to him for a strip sack too, so they were getting it done in every single way possible. This Toronto defense really didn't even play that terrible. They got to Cody Fajardo 7 times. It's just, their offense, when you turn the ball over 9 times, man, as good as your defense may be, and Toronto had one of the best defenses in the league, you're going to be on the field for longer, give up more first downs, which ended up resulting as this game went along, and Fajardo making the passes necessary for his team to win, connecting on a touchdown. Yeah, had an interception, but bounced back from that, stand back, efficient on the ground as the game went along, and Montreal just led by their defense, offense doing enough to get the job done, getting it done to pull off a huge upset against the Toronto Argonauts yesterday afternoon, that is. So yeah, for Montreal, they will be facing off against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the Grey Cup, and it's crazy because out of all the years of CFL, the 100 years of CFL football and it being an 8-team league, now a 9-team league, these two teams have never faced off against each other in the Grey Cup. It's crazy. I never knew that, and I thought about it, I guess, these teams have never faced off in the Grey Cup in my lifetime. It's crazy because the league is so small. And, yeah, the Bombers heading into this one, they have all the advantages on paper, but, hey, so did the Toronto Argonauts. So I don't think this Montreal team should be taken lightly. They played really spirited yesterday, a lot more energy than the Toronto Argonauts had. You could see after that first turnover, just all the energy, it seemed like it got sucked out of Chad Kelly, and he just couldn't recover from it. He was frustrated. And yeah, this Bombers team, if you end up having a big turnover in that game coming up in the Grey Cup against the Montreal Alouettes, you got to respond. And I think that this Bombers team, it's going to be interesting to see what happens coming up against the Montreal Alouettes, a team where the Bombers won the season series against them, but they haven't played in quite a while, more so earlier on in the season as the last time these two teams played. But yeah, we'll get into some CFL not award nominations, but all-star nominations who got named to the East and West Division teams. From your Winnipeg Blue Bombers, it is Zach Collaros and Brady Oliveira, Dalton Schoen, Nick Dembski, Patrick Neufeld, Jamarcus Hardrick, and Stanley Bryant, all being named to the West All-Star team on the offense. So Bombers loaded on these all-star teams, taking a look at it on offense, and same with on defense with Willie Jefferson at defensive end, as well as Demario Houston and Evan Holm and Brandon Alexander. Special teams, Bombers with no one there, but I believe Mike O'Shea got named as head coach to that team. So yeah, more representation on the offensive side of things for the Bombers, a little less on the defensive side of things, none special teams wise, but that offensive group really showing out and highlighting the West roster for the Bombers and the West on that offensive unit. But yeah, coming up after this next transition, I'll be back to preview the upcoming 110th Grey Cup between the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Montreal Alouettes. Not getting into full predictions of who I think is going to be winning that game, but yeah, going to be getting into just some early thoughts and stuff, things that I've been thinking about. You won't want to miss it coming up next year to end off this edition of the True Blue Podcast here on GShow Productions, brought to you by Make Canada Fasteners and Tools, Terrico, as well as goaltenders. We'll be back, folks, in just a moment. Welcome back, everybody, to the True Blue Podcast for episode 7. I will be, going into the final part of this episode now, which is talking about the upcoming 110th Grey Cup will be played in Hamilton, and how awesome is it that Green Day is going to be performing. They're honestly probably my favorite all-time band. They've kind of gone downhill throughout the years in terms of their music, but they got so much established, great stuff, so many bangers, and I can't wait to see what they play. I feel like, there's songs like Holiday and Boulevard of Broken Dreams that are a given for them to play. Welcome to Paradise as well, I'm sure it'll be played. Going to be interesting to see if they play American Idiot, with it being in Canada. Maybe they poke some fun at America in general, as Green Day likes to kind of stir the pot. But yeah, Basket Case is another great one. They just got so many great ones. I'd be here all day if I had to name them all. Such a fantastic band, and what a great get for the CFL. As much as they've kind of screwed things up this year with the stats, and the scheduling wasn't the best. Coming through here with a phenomenal Grey Cup lineup in terms of who's going to be playing at halftime. 2 years ago was the best Grey Cup halftime show I'd say that I've watched, with the Arkell's playing. Last year's was terrible, so not a fan of it. I don't mind country, but I just wasn't into the halftime show last year. This year's halftime show should be one to remember. I hope. That's a cliche that gets thrown around. I really hope it is one to remember, and I hope that Green Day comes out and puts on a show for the folks down in Hamilton, all the CFL fans coming together for a celebration. But it's going to be mostly Bombers fans and Montreal Alouettes fans, as you probably expect. Hamilton Ticats fans, it would be crazy if they had made it into the Grey Cup because, the atmosphere was crazy there when the Bombers beat them back in 2021. Would have been a nuts atmosphere again this year for sure. But it's going to be a great atmosphere again in the Grey Cup. Going to be interesting to see how packed of a house it is. I'm also going to be interested to see how many people tune in, wondering if Toronto losing does anything for the viewership. But at the same time, Toronto doesn't really seem like they got a strong CFL fan base compared to teams like the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, the Hamilton Tiger Cats, even the Montreal Alouettes, for example. Toronto, their fans don't always show out. I know they had a good showing yesterday, but just from a general viewing point, though, not having Chad Kelly in this game, I'm not sure how much he attracts in terms of viewership outside of Canada. But going to be interesting to see what happens in this game in terms of the viewership, what the numbers will be reported on afterwards. I'm not even sure what last year's was. But, this Montreal Alouettes team lost only 7 games this season in the East. They were 11-7, quietly one of the best teams in the CFL. Now, the big thing for them this season was that offensively, this wasn't a team that would put up the most points. If we take a look at it here, they were 4th in points for per game this season. Their yards per game ranked 6th in the league, just a bit over Edmonton, a team that was middle in the pack in terms of rushing the football, a team that, in terms of passing the football, bottom 4 in the league. So for them, I think that maybe a lot of people were sleeping on them was because of that offense and how it just wasn't able to deliver, and things were looking a bit different from in previous years where this team's offense was good along with its defense in terms of being among the top in the league, because Montreal's defense, like I said, absolutely phenomenal. 2nd least points allowed in the league this season, beating out the Toronto Argonauts in that aspect. The only better team than them, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers there, and also being one of the best teams at limiting teams in yardage in the CFL, top 3 in that category. Not as dominant rush-wise, but against the pass, one of the best teams against it this season in the CFL for the Montreal Alouettes. They allowed the 2nd best completion percentage in terms of having the best defense against the pass at 64.4% completion percentage against only. So, this Bombers team, the 9 turnovers that Montreal had in that game against Toronto, I think that if Chad Kelly was a bit smarter with the football, maybe most of those wouldn't happen as much. But you could tell they were getting him frustrated, and that's the way you go out and you beat great teams. You get their best players frustrated, and you build off momentum. You play with energy, and you do the necessary things you need to do to extend drives and to, put up some points offensively, and you ride on the defense like Montreal did. Good things can happen, and it did yesterday. I mean, this team, coached by Jason Maas, got to give them credit. They came out with a game plan to be energetic, to not give Toronto an inch, and they did exactly that yesterday and were rewarded for it. Now, going up against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, with the Bombers having a week to dissect this footage, looking at how things went, because this Bombers team, I think if you can go out and you can get off to a quick start, if you can get off to an early lead, I think that plays into the hands of the Bombers really well, and I think they'll be looking at what mistakes Toronto made against that defense last week and how the Bombers can really go out there and try to, have some more success against this Montreal Alouettes defense is what I guess I'm trying to say. For this Bombers team, they got a tall task ahead of them in terms of, going up against the defense that's probably going to come in hungry and energetic again to come out and beat a team like the Blue and Gold. Like, the Bombers come in as favorites. Montreal is going to be fully embracing that underdog role. It's going to be two former Saskatchewan QBs going at it against each other in Cody Fajardo and Zach Collaros. Fajardo being the one that ended up winning the MOP the season that Collaros ended up being traded from Saskatchewan, and the Bombers ended up beating the Riders in that West final to win their first Grey Cup of the two that they've won in these past 3 years. First matchup, of course, between these two teams in CFL history in a Grey Cup, which is pretty crazy. Two power backs going at it in Willie Stanback and Brady Oliveira. Stanback going to be looking to have a huge game, I'm sure, to prove that he's among the top RBs in the league. Oliveira looking to cap off a fantastic season for himself in this game. You take a look at the defenses, good playmakers all around, teams that can force turnovers. You take a look at the special teams. Just trying to find that too. Special teams. I mean, Winnipeg should have a big advantage here in terms of field goal percentage since Montreal is the worst in the league. That's going to be something I think that it's going to really intrigue me in this game to see how special teams ends up playing out. But yeah, overall, I think that, the early consensus would be a Blue Bombers victory in the Grey Cup just because of how they're favored on paper and how good that defense and offense is better than Montreal's by quite a bit on paper. But hey, I mean, in this game, if Montreal's D is able to come out and do the same type of things as they were against Toronto to Winnipeg, this is going to be a dogfight of a game. I think it's going to be more of that defensive matchup that we see in the 110th Grey Cup if it does go that way and we see quite a few turnovers. But I do think that this Bombers offense on paper just way more talented than this Montreal Alouettes team, and I think that should give the Bombers the biggest advantage. Running the ball against this Alouettes team has proven to be easier this season than passing the ball, and for the Bombers, I think that's great because you just need Zach Collaros to protect the football. Sure, it'd be nice for him to get those big shots and convert on them, but at the same time, when you have the best RB in the league in Brady Oliveira, and for how good it was working to start off the game, once Montreal adjusts to that, maybe you can hit more and open up more with the passing game. So yeah, I'm not going to give my full prediction right now, but I will say that, objectively, if Montreal had a bit more on offense, I think that I could see them winning this Grey Cup. But for right now, my early pick is the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, just based on the defense and the offense that they have. But I don't think this game is over before it's even started. I've seen Darren Bauman, who's been a guest on this show, say that in 90 minutes, the Grey Cup will be determined from the West. So yeah, I don't think you should write this Montreal team off. Maybe that's what Toronto did a bit of, and we all know what happened last year with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I was really confident. A lot of Bombers fans were against the Argonauts, and the Argos proved to be the Dragon Slayer, proved to take out the Bombers. They were the underdog in that game. Montreal's going to be the underdog in this game again, and I think that the players that have been there before for the Bombers they know that they got unfinished business, and I think that it's going to be a business-like mindset for the Blue and Gold. Coming out next week against the Montreal Alouettes, it should be a fantastic game. Hoping it is anyways, and I can't wait to see what happens in it. But we are going to take one more transition on this edition of the True Blue Podcast. I'll be back for some final words here next, here on GShow Productions for episode 7. Well, you made it to the end of this edition of the True Blue Podcast, brought to you by Make Canada Fasteners and Tools, Terrico, and Goaltender. Special thanks to those guys for all sponsoring GShow Productions and this podcast once again. For Make Canada Fasteners and Tools, be sure to visit their store locations in Brandon and Winnipeg today for your one-stop shop for all your industrial needs. To Terrico, serving Manitoba producers for over 80 years, and to Goaltenders, your goalie's personal video review service. Fantastic day of football last night for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, punching their 4th straight ticket into the Grey Cup. We're going to have two more shows coming up to end off this season, maybe even 3. We'll have to wait and see what comes up, but at least one more show for sure coming out on Friday next week at 9 p.m. Central Time. Getting back into it. My apologies for having the whole schedule mixed up. It's been my health hasn't been the greatest lately. I won't lie to you. These past 2 weeks, man, it's been terrible. Like yesterday, what the heck? I was all fired up to do this podcast as well as the Jet Fuel podcast, which for you Winnipeg Jets fans, that is coming up at 3:15. So be excited for that. But yeah, was gonna do this yesterday. Was throwing up quite a bit, feeling way better today. So I do think I have the 24-hour flu, but yeah, we're going to get back to what is supposed to be regular scheduled programming next week, Friday at 9 p.m. Central Time, as I'll be joined by potentially some guests. You'll have to wait and see to find out. Be sure to check us out on social media to find us, and check out what the guest lineup will be. We'll also post that on our website at gshow.ca, but I'll give my full predictions, my final predictions for what I think is going to happen in the Grey Cup. We're going to be talking X Factors. We're going to give you guys an update on the injury report. We're going to talk about the keys to the game. It's going to be a lot of fun, and for you guys, Bomber Nation, I hope you guys are ready for it. Thank you so much for watching today. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. Like I said, for you Winnipeg sports fans out there, for you Winnipeg Jets fans, we got our Jet Fuel podcast coming out in about 15 minutes here on YouTube, so you won't want to miss that. But until Friday, folks, 2 days away from the biggest game of the season now in the Blue Bombers 2023 CFL season. I've been your host, Graham the G Show Forsyth, giving you the salute, peacing out, and saying so long on this Sunday afternoon. Nico Feniak going to take us away now with an outro. Go Blue. See you guys 2 days away from the Grey Cup on Friday night. Take care.